2008, I moved here at the age of 21 in a pair of jeans and chappals and in a t-shirt, thinking, chalo, why not? Let's give it a shot. So just before I go off on this holiday to Kashmir, I'm thinking to myself, something's got to happen. And I have a conversation with a friend of mine who's running a little drama studio called The Hive, where I used to go and do like a couple of classes. The night before I leave, they tell me, listen, we want to sell the business because we've just gotten our PR for Canada. And now who's going to take this over? And I very kind of am like, do you think I could?
What's it like right now? Is it in a phase where it's at its equilibrium?
So it's exactly like a child, right? We're 11 years old.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sayonara. How are you guys? This is Mao Shajaz. You're watching me on The Expat Story, listening to me on Spotify, wherever my voice is heard. As always, I want to bring to you guests who have fascinating expat stories, but then they're also fascinating people in general. This girl who's sitting in the studio with me, we go a weirdly long way back. We met in very cute circumstances, and we will talk about that. She was an RJ. She's doing something which is really interesting. It's something called The Hive. She has had a long and a very illustrious history in the UAE. You may recognize her voice. You may recognize her face absolutely immediately. Welcome to the studio, Malvika Varadharan. Assalamu alaikum. Hi, how are you? How's it going?
Wow, that's a lot of questions. Hi, how am I? Good.
Yeah.
How's it going? Pretty good.
Good. Alhamdulillah. That's good to know. But these are the easy questions. We'll come to the hard questions now.
Yeah.
How is it going? Thank you so much, first of all, for giving me your time.
No, thank you for having me.
You and I met at a very interesting juncture. You and Sid were hosting a meet and greet with Anushka Sharma and Shah Rukh Khan at Dera City Centre for Jab Harry Met Sejal.
Yes.
And that was such a crazy time. And like, I cannot believe, like a lot of my friends think that it's a Photoshop picture of me and Shah Rukh.
Yeah.
And like, no, that's real.
That's
so
real.
she's here.
That's true. That's true. It's real.
Yes, we met. Anyway, so you were an RJ.
Yes.
For how long? Tell me your expat story.
I moved to the UAE in 2008.
Where are you from in India? Tell me.
Bangalore. I'm from Bangalore.
Okay.
I'm a Bangalore girl, born and raised in Bangalore.
What's
very
that
much
like?
It's a beautiful, it was. I don't know if I can say it is. It was a beautiful green city.
Why is it not? What's happened? Like pollution and all?
Yeah, I mean, development, infrastructure is falling apart right now. But before its traffic woes, before it was known for its long 3-hour-long traffic jams, it was known to be the garden city of India. It's full of parks, full of big trees, full of bookshops. My dad's a bookseller. So I grew up in the shade of a bookshelf and lots of lovely trees. I did theatre in school and college and then kind of made my way to radio. And then in 2008, I moved here at the age of 21 in a pair of jeans and chappals and in a t-shirt, thinking, chalo, why not? Let's give it a shot. And like everybody else who moves here to the UAE, I was like, okay, 1 year. Get some international experience on my CV and then head back and, think about what to do with life. I moved here in 2008, but my radio journey did not end in 1 year. It was 2008 to 2020. So 12 years, of which 11 and a half, I would say, almost, 11 were on The Breakfast Show, which meant that I was the first voice that a lot of South Asian expats in the UAE heard in the morning, first thing.
Yeah. What was that like? Because we talk about what you're doing now, but I was talking to Lokesh earlier, a couple of months ago, and he talked about how it's such a thrill to connect to people. And you meet them and talk to them in a very strange way, in which although a lot of people think that radio is dead and radio doesn't, but I think it's like people don't know how big it is in the UAE.
It is.
And what a huge celebrity you are.
It was much more than it is now, even.
Well, yeah, now you compete with influencers also.
Yeah, now you compete with influencers, of course. But I think in that period that we came in, it was a very interesting time because Facebook was the big thing. I remember we started the City 1016 Facebook page. It was a big campaign with 200 followers or some like silly number like that. But yeah.
Can you imagine though?
Yeah, so we really saw that transition from it being an audio-only medium where you would maybe have a picture or two of yours taken at a photo shoot, right? That was 2008 when I first joined. And by the time I quit in 2020, a lot of what you did on a daily basis was actually video content. Right. So radio is big in the UAE, and I think that's thanks to a wonderful Arabian radio network that was built and grew to be this powerhouse of talent and lots of fantastic ideas. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of cabbies that I would initially when I came to the UAE, and it was so strange to me. They're listening to the radio. There's somebody talking in the car,
Yeah.
and it's a radio jockey. Because in Pakistan, it's not that big anymore.
Yeah.
Used to be.
Used to
huge.
be,
I'm sure
yeah.
this is the same in India.
Same.
So when I would listen to the car rides, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, and it was so interesting. Because you think, oh, Dubai is all like, I used to, again, one of the misconceptions you had before you moved to the UAE, and I'll talk to you about that as well. That what were the ideas in your head that this is what the UAE is going to be like? Because one thing which I used to be like, but everybody's speaking Urdu?
Yeah.
Like, that's so cool. So that was one of my big reasons for me to, because I've lived in Hong Kong, but I was like, no, I will live in the UAE. And Hong Kong was amazing. But I was like, no. I don't want to struggle to understand somebody what they're saying. What were your conceptions about the UAE before you moved here?
Oddly enough, when I had little or no idea of what the UAE was like. Now, most families in India have, especially in the south, like in Kerala, almost everyone has one member of the family who's in the Gulf, right? But mine was a unique family, a Tamilian family, and we were raised in Bangalore, and I knew nobody in Dubai. I knew literally no one.
Right.
I just thought it was going to be this desert with a lot of gold shops. I mean, this was my idea of what Dubai might be like, and I came here completely blind. No idea of how
no frame
big.
of reference.
No, it was, to me, it was international, right?
Okay.
And before that, like you, I had been to Singapore.
Yeah.
I'd spent a little time in Singapore. My sister was already based out of London.
Right.
So I knew what those expat communities looked like.
Right,
but
right.
I had no idea what Dubai was going to be
Right.
like. And I completely underestimated how big Bollywood was in this city. And the funny thing, just yesterday I was talking about this. When I moved to Dubai, I knew almost nothing about Bollywood, right? So I don't know, I honestly don't know how I scammed the radio station into hiring me. Because I had watched maybe DDLJ and like 4 other Bollywood films, and that's it. Because Bangalore, if you grew up in Bangalore in the 90s, our pop culture references were all like English music, rock music. We barely watch Bollywood. It wasn't part of my growing up years, and no
isn't
one
South Indian
around
cinema
me,
really huge in its own right?
Yeah.
That too, right?
And this little subculture that I was a part of wasn't even watching Kannada movies or Tamil movies or Malayalam movies. We were just watching English films.
Okay.
This was we were a Star Plus, group of people. And it's a little subculture and a subculture and a subculture,
Okay, okay.
So knew nothing about Bollywood. Nothing. And to me, I honestly, like yesterday I was saying this, I could not tell Jitendra from Dharmendra if they slapped me in the face.
What are you saying? As a
Yeah.
Pakistani, I'm like surprised.
Yeah, I could not, like, when you said a Devanand film, I was just, sure. No clue, no idea. Okay. My entirety of Bollywood was, I knew Shah Rukh, I knew Kajol from DDLJ, I knew Arvind Swamy from Roja, I
Roja.
knew Bombay. This. A.R. Rahman was my introduction to Bollywood. And that's it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I thought Dubai was going to be like a desert and very international. Then I came here and realized I had to learn how to speak Hindi.
Really?
So I learned how to really speak Hindi only in the UAE.
Okay. And then you did.
And then I mean, yeah, I can speak some Hindi now. I wouldn't do it on air ever, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, because for us, like Pakistanis, one of the big cultural experiences you get is like, a part of my family is from India, right? And I always say this to my Indian friends is that we know more about your culture than you guys know about us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because like we know Bollywood.
Yeah.
We grew up watching Sonpari.
Yeah.
And we grew up watching so many of Indian content.
Yeah.
And also a lot of my family, because they are from India and they migrated after partition, they would go. They visited India a lot.
Right.
So they would tell me, oh, India's like this and Allahabad is like this and, UP is like this and all that. So when I speak to my Indian friends and they're like, oh, really? Is that what Karachi is like? I'm like, yeah, the Karachi is pretty much like Mumbai. Or Lahore is pretty much like Delhi.
Yeah.
Because, they're like culturally and locationally and, geographically similar. What were your experiences like when you interacted with us, like with Pakistanis? Because when I interact with Indians, again, it's always so similar. So many things are similar. Like you're talking about, you're from Bangalore. My mom's best friend is from Bangalore.
Oh, lovely.
Like her ancestors are all from, so they speak in a very they speak in a certain way.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
foods are like
Very
they're like-
different.
And she would tell me, like, this is the Bangalore thing. I'm like, really? Oh, okay. I didn't notice. Like, no, this is not a because part of her family is Kashmiri. Like, this is not a Kashmiri thing. This is a Bangalore thing. So, what was your experience like culturally?
So I feel like very often, right, my friends from Delhi have more in common with my friends from Pakistan than I have with my friends from Delhi.
Right.
Like, in terms of like cultural references and language and sense of humor and, so different. Like we're so different. But one of my best friends in the UAE is Pakistani. I would say my best friend in the UAE is Pakistani.
Yeah.
And she is actually knows more about Indian culture than I do. So she could make a mean dhokla and could tell you a good idli chutney from a
Is she
bad
from
idli
Karachi,
chutney.
Is she from Karachi?
Yeah, I think she is.
Yeah, because Karachi is it's got a lot of South Indian, you'll find all South Indian foods. The other day, my fitness trainer who's from India, and she's like, oh, whenever you go to Karachi, you tell me, I'll come visit. I said, please do. And then she said that, I said, you will never, and she's from Mangalore.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you have any issues, like you like non-veg food, you will find it.
Yeah.
We have a Bombay bakery, we have like a Delhi sweets, we have a Delhi colony.
Yeah.
We have all these kind of Indian names and all, and it's very so for me it's not like, oh, I like interaction is definitely new because we didn't know a lot of Indian people who visited in Pakistan, but a lot of the things that Indians eat and the way
The
that
culture
is
is so similar, right?
So
similar. Our values, the way we look at family, the way that we
Very similar.
interact with people.
Very similar.
We're led by emotion. We're, so many things
Yeah.
are so similar. I mean, but for, I think, in the case of a Tamilian and someone from, Karachi, yes, there's a language difference, I think, slightly. But apart from that, I feel like I said, you could be from Delhi. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to tell.
You were able to tell.
I wouldn't be able to tell.
So you were the RJ, the thing. What made you leave that life? RJ, being an RJ must have been quite a ride.
It was amazing. I mean, I can't complain, right? Beautiful work. Stressful life, no doubt, because you do wake up super early in the morning and you got, your day starts at 6. The first words you say are on air. So there is no warm up to life. So you go from 0 to 100 first thing in the morning. It was a lot of celebrities, a lot of red carpets, a lot of award ceremonies, a lot
I've
of
seen you
dressing
do
up,
all
a lot
of
of
that.
glam,
Yeah.
a lot of television and cameras and all that jazz. But I just felt that somewhere the time had come for me to say, okay, am I really learning anything different? Though my heart was just pulling in another direction. And I know that it doesn't, I think I'm just someone who is really led by that. I'm just really led by a internal compass of like what's pulling me. It did aid the situation that because I don't have kids, I wasn't worried about things like how am I going to pay school fees or I need a stable job or, some of those things. So I was able to kind of do the calculation of, okay, suppose I start something on my own. What's it going to cost me life-wise? And I was able to do the math and put a bit of like my financial aspects in place to ensure that I would be able to take on an entrepreneurial venture. And really now in retrospect, I mean, when I look at it, I do think like, what were you thinking? So wait, hold on. You quit the biggest breakfast show in the city.
Yeah.
Okay, with a very stable income.
Yeah.
Incredible fame.
Yeah.
Being recognized in almost every room you walk into, like, are you that person? And decided to go to a Bardubai drama studio and teach 100 kids how to act. What were you thinking again? Like, who does that?
Yeah.
Who does that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense unless you are completely in
It
love.
makes sense to me, but we'll come to that. But then, okay, so you've just taken this decision. Where did it come from? This decision of like doing that?
Honestly, I just came to a point where I really loved the people I was working with and I loved the job and I loved the money and the comfort and all of that. And there were all these gigs that I was doing on the side. So there's all of that income and fame and blah, 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 all that. But there was just something in me that was like, okay, it was exciting to meet Shah Rukh once, second time, third time, Salman once, second time, third time. Fourth time, I'm like, shall we do something new now? Should we do something exciting? I think also the direction that radio was moving in was a very visual. I mean, you start becoming more influencers than you were radio presenters. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more
Earthy?
Long run, yeah, earthy. It's funny you say that, whenever someone asks me to compare radio and teaching, I say that radio is like fireworks. You work towards one fabulous moment of glory where the skies light up and everyone's jaw drops and you're like, wow, that was cool. And it's cool in its own way.
It is.
Teaching is like gardening. You put the seed, you walk there, you look at it every day, you're like, okay, someday this is going to flower.
Months and months, yeah.
Wait for years. 16 years later, there's like, hey, there's a fruit.
I finally see a tree there.
Yeah, but it is also beautiful because you get to kind of curate this garden and you kind of build things ground up. So the question of like why I do what I do is, I think that's clear to me, crystal clear, crystal clear.
And what is it that you're doing at the Hive, which is a setup which I remember you and I talked about it when you were just beginning it.
Yeah.
And it was like, and to me also at that time, it was like, again, it was like, she's left that for this? What is this?
Yeah.
What even is, so tell me, what even is this and how far have you come since we chatted about it?
Very far, actually.
Yeah.
2018 end. Dramatic. You want the dramatic story?
Dramatic. Always dramatic.
Story.
Always
Of course, this is my
yeah.
wish.
Yeah, 100%.
Bring on not the filmy. Is it even?
Is it even a story worth telling? Yeah. Okay. Bring it on.
So I'm having these pulls in my heart, which is like, come on, you got to do something, Malvika. This cannot be the be all and end all, right? Something has to happen. Something has to shift. So it's 2018. It's the summer, and I decide to go to Kashmir on a holiday on my own. I do the Great Lakes trek, which is 8 days of being alone in the mountains with nothing but, not alone, a guide, a horse, and a horseman. And we walk
sounds
through.
alone.
It's very alone, yeah. So I'm doing this
I
trek
can't believe
in
you're counting
Kashmir.
the horse in this
Very
company.
important part of the journey. I would not want to be carrying that bedding on my back. So just before I go off on this holiday to Kashmir, I'm thinking to myself, something's got to happen. I've got to make a big shift, and I know I've got to make a big shift. And I have a conversation with a friend of mine who's running a little drama studio called The Hive, where I used to go and do like a couple of classes every once in a bit and spend some extra time there and teach a few of the kids, and it was fun. The night before I leave, they tell me, listen, we want to sell the business because we've just gotten our PR for Canada. And now who's going to take this over? And I I'm like, do you think I could? Like, maybe I could buy a business? And in my life at this point, there is no one, dur tak, in my family who's doing anything entrepreneurial, right? So I have nowhere to. I'm like, okay, let me think about this. Maybe this is too rash a decision. I'm going to go on this trek. I spent 8 days with no internet, no phone, no calls, no connectivity. I'm staring at the stars and I'm like, something tells me this is the right move. And I come back and I'm like, okay, cool. The answer is yes. So we get into negotiations and I buy this little business over. At this point, it's got 150 kids who come in across the week, and I'm like going to be a drama teacher. It's a 2-person company at this point. Literally a 2-person company. Okay, let's give it a shot. That's where we start. And we build and we
this
grow.
is 2018.
This is 2019 I took it over. I actually went to my boss and I said, I'm quitting, yeah? I bought a new business, by the way. She said, are you kidding me? No, don't do that. Take a year and do both, okay? I'm going to help you do both. You do your breakfast show and then you go run the business, okay? You'll find a way. Best boss in the world, by the way. So she helps me through this year, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And we grow from 150 to 300, 300 to 600, 600 to 800, 800 to today we're at 1,200 students who we teach drama and public speaking. We have 7 centers around the UAE. We have a team of 20. We influence the lives of thousands of children through the products. And I cannot be more thankful for that. 2020 was when I was like, okay, this needs to be reined in. This is like one of those, the horse needs both my hands. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to really run. Yes. And thank God I did. Put an odd time, Mevish. I put in my papers on the 6th of January.
Yeah.
30th of March, COVID is at its peak. Peak, okay?
Yeah.
We're in lockdown. We can't buy groceries. We were in that. And I was like, okay, that's it. Worst time in the world.
Worst time in the world.
Worst time in the world to quit a job.
Yeah.
But I did it.
And then you did. And then this journey that you're on now, and I think that it may be because you're always such a person-centered individual. Because even as an RJ, it is a lot of person-centered job.
Yes, it is.
It's about connecting to another person. It's about talking to another person, getting down to their heart and soul. When you are teaching the kids drama, how do you think that helps them understand the world better or be better human beings?
It starts with something so basic, naming emotions, which is something that even today as adults, we find it difficult to do, right? If I ask you, how do you feel about that experience? How do you feel about that person? It's hard for us to say, actually, I think it's disappointment with betrayal. It's hard for us to find the words to describe and name how we feel. So I think drama starts in that place, right? Where you read a piece of text and you're like, okay, how is this person feeling? Let's put a name to that feeling.
Yeah.
And then we try to embody what another person is going through. And in the world of make-believe, you're actually learning more about yourself
100%.
and more about what it means to be a human in this world, what it means to be an emotional being in this world than anything else. So I think that's the beauty of drama. And of course, the byproduct of doing dramatic work is, of course, number one is an emotional education. Number two is you build tremendous confidence. You have the ability to face an audience and get up on stage. You learn how to communicate better because you're able to understand that it's not, how we hear, it's not what you said, it's how you said
That's
it.
how you said it, yeah.
And that's an intelligence that becomes hardwired when you do drama. It's in your blood. When you speak, you understand that it's not about what you're saying.
So you're basically teaching them emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, communication, collaboration, working in teams, that agility, and most importantly, creativity. The ability to build a world around you based on a story. That's amazing.
Drama, and especially because India is such a huge and rich place for arts and culture, and the fact that Bollywood itself, or even the South Indian cinema and all the forms of media and entertainment are incredibly large and rich, and I would still say, despite the fact that OTT is having Bollywood for breakfast, I would still say that there is a lot of room there. When your kids graduate, or when your kids are looking for, okay, I've learned how to master this skill or this craft of acting or whatever, I want to act in films, or I want to do TV, or I want to do, I don't know, I want to do little sketches on YouTube. What are the paths that you offer, and how do you guide the kids?
So we mostly, so we always say that the goal of an arts education is not necessarily, the idea of the Hive is not to turn 1,200 students into Shah Rukh Khan. No, the idea is...
There's only one Shah Rukh Khan.
Yeah, the idea is, yes, some of you will grow up and become actors, and a lot of my senior students now have. I have one student in Canada right now who's pursuing his bachelor's in acting. I have a student in the US who's doing a fabulous work in one of the best acting schools in the world. I have a student who's moved to Bombay. She's doing Bollywood films. She was recently in a film that was released here. So now my kids are grown to the age where they're pursuing this. A lot of them are also doing other stuff that's related to creative work. So one of my dearest students is learning literature in the Trinity College in Dublin. So a lot of them are doing law and communication that way, where they're taking their dramatic skills and they're applying it in different ways. So my job is not really to turn them into actors, right? My job is to use acting as a petri dish from where you will learn other things.
Other skills.
You know, from where you will learn how to conduct a room, from where you will learn to appreciate text, from where you will learn how to put on a show, from where you will learn entrepreneurship. Because I think drama is an incredible place to learn how to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
You're managing a team, you're getting people together, you're scheduling things, you're building a thing, you're marketing your play, you're engaging an audience. Actually, drama is your number one entrepreneurial school.
Also, theater is also something which is so interactive. It's like a live wire situation.
Correct.
And all the great actors that we've known in Bollywood or Hollywood or Pakistani industry anywhere have come from theater.
Correct.
So every time somebody tells me I've done theater, I'm like, okay, I have faith in this person's skills. Do you watch Pakistani dramas? Is that something
I don't watch only a lot of things, actually. I'm not much of a watcher.
Oh, yeah.
I'm mostly either working, driving, or working out.
No,
that's all my life.
That's your entire. Well, I would strongly suggest that you would watch. You tell your kids to watch because our dramas also come from theater and literature.
Yes,
our dramas are not technically TV.
Yeah,
they are coming from backgrounds of, and that's what I love about Pakistani dramas is that they are very oriented around society.
Correct.
And emotions. And wo dur se sometimes some people criticize, oh, saas bahu hai. No, it goes way deep. Some dramas are like that. It's stupid, but a lot of others are real, psychological. studies into characters and,
and
how,
families and
families,
dynamics and people
society.
and structures, society.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched a little bit of Pakistani dramas, and I do think that there's a nuance to the characters,
there
and there's a
is.
gentleness in the way that it's dealt with, which outdoes India by a mile.
Yeah, definitely. But then, India has that lead on films, which we don't have.
Yeah.
Because the industry is much larger, most cinemas and everything. When you now look at your life in the UAE for the past so many years, what have been the greatest and the best takeaways? And, now UAE is there's so many more options in the UAE for long-term considerations than they were before. They've introduced golden visas and this visa and that visa and so many these kind of things. Because there is a thing about UAE, it can be transient for a lot of people. But you've spent so much time here. How do you look at your life here and how do you see the future?
It's amazing, no? I still feel like I just landed yesterday. I'm just about to go in another year. No, I think the UAE has been very kind to me. And I think UAE is one of those cities where if you catch it on the upswing, you can go to places you never imagined. I never would have imagined the life I have today. I never would have imagined this kind of abundance. I come from a very middle class family. My mom was a bank clerk and my dad worked in a publishing, it was a bookseller. Okay, so we're a middle class Tamilian family. I did not imagine the life that we have now. So I think Dubai can do that for you, right? I think if you've got ambition and you've got grit, and you know how to work a room of people, Dubai is your place.
Dubai is your place.
Dubai is your place,
yeah.
right? And it's the same thing. So it's a double-edged sword. But I think it can also be very perception-driven. So if you don't have that ability to work a room, even though you might have the talent or the skill, you may not. You feel a bit wronged by the city.
Yeah,
you feel
such a good point. Yeah.
What is this? I know so much more than that person, but why is that person getting the gig?
Yeah.
So I think it is a room that appreciates people. It's a city that appreciates people who are ambitious, people who can walk the talk and who can also talk the walk. It appreciates this kind of hustle mentality, which is like, okay, this is not working. I'll quickly adapt. I'll move. Look at the city as of even right now, right? It doesn't take ages to build something. We took the decision today. By tomorrow, we're rolling it out. By the end of the month, it's out in the market.
Yeah.
It's
And
very
then
quick.
It's very quick and it adapts to things so fast.
Very agile.
And it's difficult for cities to be agile.
Yeah.
The older they get, the less agile they get, but it's reverse here.
Yeah.
The older it's getting, the more agile it's getting, the more changes it's allowing its people to experience. When now that you look at the way the global order is, like you have cities which are fast like Dubai, and then you have also your corner of Dubai, which is more about the heart and the soul and the art. One more criticism that often is given to Dubai, which also I don't agree with at all, and I've talked to Anamika about it, because the line of work you, me, Anamika, we're all in is very arts driven. It's very person driven, and a lot of times Dubai seems like, oh, it's just buildings and it's just like. But so you are a great example.
Thank you.
Of what Dubai does when it comes to art and theatre, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we're able to occupy a certain space, and I do wish that there were more. I wish we had a more robust arts and culture scene. My grouse with Dubai is not that it doesn't. I think it's a great place if you've got an entrepreneurial mindset, and I think if you've got an entrepreneurial mindset, you can spin anything.
Yeah.
Today you're selling carpets, tomorrow you can sell drama, day after you can sell this table. Like, you have to have that ability to move, na?
Yeah.
But I think that it is very good to people who have that skill, right? But I think what it lacks is more spaces where arts and culture can become a part of your life without it being so expensive. We fly great shows in. It's a city where I've watched Hamilton, I've watched Chicago, I've watched some of the best shows from Mughal-e-Azam to Chicago. Actually, you've watched everything at the Dubai Opera, right?
Yeah.
And you have these massive, fantastic concerts by the best musicians in the business. But are we able to build ground up? I think that's the question that I think is a work in progress.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of work, and I think that Dubai is kind of opening its ears now to the importance of having an arts and culture scene that's more local. And there are there are pockets where this is happening. You walk into an Al Sarkal. There are sections of Al Khuz where you walk in and you're
The
like,
Louvre,
wow.
my God.
The Louvre,
oh
yeah.
my God. Is it not the most amazing thing?
It is. It's beautiful, right? Or even Dubai Opera. Like you go in there,
Yeah.
you watch some of these shows and it's amazing. But how do I make the Louvre and the Dubai Opera accessible to the bank employee, to the person who's making 5,000 to 8,000 dirhams a month, to the person who wants to do music and arts and culture and all of these wonderful things, but like also has a full-time job and has to take the metro and 2 buses to get to
Yeah.
a certain place.
to a
These
certain place.
logistics have not been ironed out, I think. I mean, I would love for us to have a place like where you could book it at 300 dirhams for a night and put up a play. But there isn't a place like that. And financially right now, it's not possible for private players like ourselves to do that because just our overheads are ridiculous. So we try to, but we need publicly owned art spaces that are up and available for rent and that works with local creators, not content creators, creators in the field of art, and culture.
Also, this bit which you've just rightly said is that it should be accessible to the bank clerk who's getting off of the work at 6, but he wants to unwind. Now, what options does he have? Go home, watch a bit of Netflix, eat, and just sit in front of the TV, zombie
Scroll on
out,
your
doom
phone.
scroll and go to sleep. So, but if there is a vibrant art and culture scene, it's a great argument for somebody like that to actually open their mind and be a part of something much bigger than.
I know it's not arts and culture, but you think about what Global Village has done.
Oh,
See,
what an
what is
amazing
it?
place.
20 dirhams and you can go in there and watch a great show and, eat some great food. And
Yeah.
so if you're able to create, I mean, I know it's a tall ask, but a global village for arts and culture where
No,
you
but
can.
I completely get what you're coming from because what you're doing is so close to you because I'm a mom to 2 autistic boys, right? So
Yeah.
for me, my ideal place in Dubai would be like a village for children with special needs
Yeah.
who can watch a movie,
Yeah.
who can swim,
Yeah.
who can, have a petting zoo there. So like
Correct.
a safer space for them
Yeah.
or a space where they're not judged. Like for parents like me, special needs families, get often inundated. Should we go to the cinema? Although Vox Cinemas introduced a sensory-friendly screening.
Yeah.
But it's still a struggle. You're still sitting with somebody who will be like, why is that kid stimming?
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
that kid making
Yeah.
this noise? Oh, he's disturbing my experience.
Correct.
But then if you have an inclusive space like that,
Yeah.
so I completely get where you're coming from. And I think that's such a fabulous idea. I hope somebody's listening.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important for it to also not be a place where only children with special needs come.
Yeah, of
so that you
course.
can have neurotypical kids interact with
Neurodivergent.
neurodivergent kids
Yes, yes.
and you can have them learn to work with each other.
Absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
the idea is not for me to create only a safe space for half my population.
Yeah.
If the other half the population doesn't know, the way, this is how I see it, right? I have 2 kids in my class, one who's on the autism spectrum and one who's neurotypical. The point is that both of you one day are going to be in positions of leadership where you're going to have to learn to work with each other. You may have a member on your team who's on the autism spectrum. You may be working with the CEO who's on the autism spectrum. You may be employed by someone on the autism spectrum. If you are so scared of this thing and you feel like it's some unspoken, demonized, dark place
Yes,
where you
a
can't
monster.
go.
Yeah.
So then what's the point?
Yeah.
Like let's just all sit at the same table and eat lunch together.
Yeah, and I think that's what that's what inclusion is, right? Like,
Exactly.
That's the spirit of inclusion,
Yeah,
that everybody
yeah.
deserves a seat at the table
at the
without
table.
having to ask for it or without having to fight for it.
Correct.
One more thing which is speaking of inclusion, is that how different countries and nationalities across the UAE live so beautifully here. And one of the best things is food.
That's true.
Oh my God. Like
That's
it's
true, that's true.
It's such
Best.
an underrated thing about Dubai.
Oh my God, tell
It's
me
a
about
foodie
it.
heaven.
My sister lives in France and 10 days after meeting her, I'm like, I want to come back. I'm missing my falafel and my, the
shawarma.
and like
And
just
my
the
hummus.
desi food
Yeah.
and the the Indian Chinese and the
Indian Chinese are so good.
That's just like, I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what do you have on us, France?
Acha, I do feel like South Asian food really deserves a better rep.
Oh yeah,
It deserves
oh, yeah.
such a better rep than
Oh, yeah.
it has right now.
And the UAE has such incredible restaurants. Someone who you should have on your show, I think, is Arwa. Have you
Yeah?
heard of
No.
her? She runs this amazing company called Frying Pan Adventures.
Okay.
And I'm her biggest fan.
Yeah?
Because she does these beautiful food walks through the city. And she can tell you the difference between, like every 100 meters, she will tell you a new food story and open your eyes to a new food
Wow, I would
history
love
in the
that.
city.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. And like, you just go to like Karama, okay? And you've got 400 cuisines in a 2 square kilometer radius.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
insanely awesome.
I mean, Karama is still something that I would say it's very organic. It's very real. You look at like a mall, which is more, manicured in its way, and even in a little food court, you'll find like a langzao noodle,
Correct.
and you'll find Bosnian kebab,
Yeah.
and you'll find Bombay chapati, and you'll find kebab roll, and you'll find chacha ji or something. Anyway, chacha-
Amazing, yeah.
it's just a absolutely wonderful level of inclusivity that one experiences in the UAE. Malvika, what are your future plans? What do you plan to do with the Hive? How's it? What's it like right now? Is it in a phase where it's at its equilibrium?
Yeah.
Or is it like growing at a massive space?
So it's exactly like a child, right? We're 11 years old. So my Hive is in her tweens now. She's getting
is
used
she temperamental?
She is temperamental. That's true. But I'm also seeing the beauty of teaching, because kids who I taught when they started out, they were 6 and I met them for the first time. Today they're 16. You know, I'm seeing that beautiful journey of a 6 to a 16-year-old, a 6 to an 18-year-old. They're graduating from university and coming back. We have 2 people at the Hive right now who are ex-Hive students.
Wow.
Yeah, who are now team members. So I guess the idea of what the Hive is going to evolve into, I have several answers to that. I think one is, I've always wanted, one of the things that I feel keeps coming back to me is kids saying the Hive is my second home. And I would love for us to have some kind of villa style space where kids can come and hang a bit more. A third space apart from school and home, where they can finish school and come and hang with us and not be staring at a screen, and find a place to play and talk and chill and learn and
Interact.
and interact without it being now you have to sign up for 17 classes and now you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a hang.
Like a
We need-
flexible space.
we need a space. We need a home. I think that's one. 2 is, I'm very actively kind of trying to understand curriculum and curriculum design better, because I do feel like at some point there is going to be a hunger in the UAE for an alternate schooling system and an alternate education. I'm definitely of the belief that the current school system is failing us on multiple different levels. I think 1 out of every 3 kids in my class is neurodivergent, and I can see that this system does not work for them.
Yeah.
A schooling system does not work. It just doesn't. And it's failing on multiple different levels. Not because of the teachers. Everyone who's an educator does it because their heart and soul is in this work. But the systems and structures are broken. So I think I would love for the Hive to one day grow into a real school. Maybe a forest school of some sort, an offbeat school, something that breaks the format a little bit. And yeah, I think the goal is that one day, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when I decide to retire, I want to hand the keys over to 100 hives, to 100 Hive kids who will be running hives around the UAE and around the world, actually. Because I think a child who has experienced what the Hive can do has absolutely no doubt about why a child should come. And I think they would be the best people to lead us into the next
They're the best
phase.
ambassadors. If they have great experiences, they're always the best.
Fantastic
The students are
leaders,
always
they're
the best.
fantastic communicators, they're empathetic humans, they have their heart in the right place. And they understand what the model, what the secret formula was all about, because it was never about drama. Drama is just the excuse to get
Drama
you in
is
the
just the
door.
surface of it.
Yeah, it's just the excuse to get you in the door.
Yeah.
It's about your relationships, your mentors, the space to be, to feel heard, to make friends, to feel at home, to feel not judged, a safe space. It's so many things, and it's hard to put it in a book. But a Hive kid knows.
What would be your greatest high in the past, all your expat life that you've been in Dubai, all the experiences that you've, and I'm including your RJ experience or whatever. And whatever is the most fulfilling to you. I don't by high, I don't mean, but I've met Shah Rukh 17 times or whatever. But personally, something that made you feel like, wow, this is in the top 10 of my experiences that I've had as an expat.
Wow. I loved meeting Shah Rukh and I was able to meet him many times. Not because I did anything special, honestly. Great
I'm
deals
sure you did.
cut by great companies around us and kudos to them. I just happened to be one little pawn in the chessboard. He's an amazing person. Radio was fantastic. The relationships I built on radio were fantastic. My co-hosts and the learnings and all of that. But nothing compares to my kids. It is by far the most fulfilling experience. When I go somewhere and someone taps me on my shoulder and says, hey, you maybe don't know me, but I'm a Hive mom and my kid comes to the Hive and she just loves coming for class and she never stops talking about it. And your heart clap game is so famous in my home and we play it all the time. Or the other day I was eating idli dosa and one little kid came up to me and she's like, Miss, I got a lead role in my school play. I wanted to tell you. And she's only 6. And, a dad comes up to me and says, dude, what are you doing at the Hive? I want my son to come back home. He's always there. He's always hanging out with you all. What are you doing with these children? And this is like, so good. So
fulfilling.
Good. So fulfilling. So fulfilling. So fulfilling. My children are so amazing. They're so amazing. I guess
What
that's
would
the
you
thing.
say
We all
to-
feel our kids are so amazing.
But then that's a legitimate feeling everybody should feel.
Yeah.
Nobody should feel like, oh, but what are they doing? That's not the feeling you want to have. What would you say to people who have that fire in the belly, who do want to take that leap, but they don't have maybe the courage or the pluck that you had at that point in time where you said, okay, I know what I need to do.
Yeah.
Because that took courage. That took a lot of courage. But a lot of people don't have that. Maybe you can speak to them and say that, I know that 9 to 5 job is really nice. I know everything else is really nice. But if your heart is calling out to something, do it.
Yeah. I actually want to make a disclaimer here. I think far too many people say follow your dreams. Take that
Such a
follow your
cliche-
dreams.
cliche, you
complete cliche. Take that dream off the shelf, put it on your desk. Number one. Okay, let's stop putting it on this pedestal of it's a dream, because the moment it's like a follow your
An
dream,
elusive thing.
it's this elusive thing that you're never going to achieve. You're never going to do anything about it. So don't talk. Let's do. Okay? Let's take the dream off the shelf, put it on your desk.
Yeah.
Step number 2 is do the math. Do the math. Because a lot of times you think that starting a business is going to be this really expensive affair. I can't do it. How am I going to afford it? You do the math and you realize it's actually cheaper than some of your handbags. It's not that much. Number 2. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not making a sweeping statement. I know that in many cases the math differs, but if you sit down and put
At
it
least
down
try and do
in
the
black
math.
and
Yeah,
white,
yeah.
then you understand, okay, these things I can compromise on. It's okay if I don't have this kind of office and I compromise on this kind of office. It's okay for me to choose this real estate. It's okay if I don't have a team of 20, I'll have a team of 3. So you know what your variables are. But if you keep it on that pedestal and you just keep dreaming and dreaming and dreaming and don't do anything about it, it's not going to work, right? So I think that's number 2. And number 3 is surround yourself with the right people who will push you. And I feel maybe the advice is don't buy your own billboard. Don't believe your own billboard. Because the moment you start doing that is when it gets dangerous. I find this with a lot of the influencer category of people, right? You keep saying I'm an expert at this and that's great for the billboard, but don't buy it. Have that degree of self-awareness that you know where you are lacking, where you need training, where you need help, where you need other people to fill that gap, and be extremely, I think sit down with yourself. Sit down with yourself and really understand what your strengths are before you take that leap forward, and then take it anyway.
But the influencers, and I do want you to comment on it a little bit, because the influencer culture has now become officially dangerous at a point where, I think we're past the point of it being dangerous, but the kind of responsibility I think influencers should feel is just not there. And I think in Urdu we call it like tamash been qaum. We've all become very avid spectators, I feel, of others. Like I do watch sometimes certain vlogs of women just like going about the house, doing their cleaning, and can feel very therapeutic at times. But then it also makes me ask myself, why am I watching this? What is it? And and then I look at the engagement on it. I'm like, 50,000 people have liked this. It's got 20 million views. I'm like, why? What is it about us that that makes us want to take a peek into other people's lives and keep watching?
Yeah.
What's your take?
Imagine if I told you, 30 years ago that 30 years from now, you're going to sit on your balcony in the evening. You're going to take a pair of binoculars and you're going to watch people living their lives through your binoculars for 4 hours straight. You would think that that person is insane.
Yeah.
You would be like, I would do anything to not be that person. Except that is exactly what we do.
What we all have become.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've all become. And I think that when you are an influencer, it's very easy to, what are you really influencing? I think it's the thing that you want to really ask yourself. You know, influencers play a very large part in marketing products and marketing ways of life. And so much so that I think I can no more really draw the line on what do I really want and what has Instagram told me that I want. I mean, am I drinking matcha because I like matcha, or
do
am
not
I
like
just
matcha? Just for the record, it's ghas.
Yeah, or am I doing this because 55 people on my feed a day have, posted pictures of this? The sort of subliminal messaging that's constantly happening about what life you should lead, what you should look like, what your relationship should be like, where you should go on a holiday, what your financial... It's everything, right?
And women also, I feel like, very susceptible to this.
Yeah.
As women, we are far, I think, like for men, I think they'll be just sitting in their, like there's this dude, I don't know if you follow him, he's sitting in his pajamas and he's like, you're a povo, you don't do this, you don't understand this elite life because you're a povo. I mean, he's funny. I love his content. His name is Shahbaz. I love his content. But I think that if women were to do that, it would not be, she would not be, somebody in the comment section would be like, just dress up nicely before you make a video. Because I've had that. I'll be going through one of my terrible days and I want to say something and I'll say it. And somebody's like, oh God, just can't look at your face because your acne is showing. I'm like, because it exists. This is the face that exists. And I feel like the pressure women have. And I'm sure you must have experienced that in your RJ life.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only have I experienced it, I can see its impact on young girls because I teach so many of them. Someone asked me the other day, actually, a mom told me, like, I don't understand why my daughter does this. She puts the phone in front of her face and takes the picture so that you can't see her face. And then I asked the daughter, I was like, why do you do that, by the way? She's like, because I don't like the way I look. So it's that simple, actually.
Ouch.
I don't want a picture of my face on the internet if it's not looking great, and you have a group of girls. I was listening to this recently, you get a group of girls who are hanging out in Dubai Mall and you'll see, like, if they're taking a picture, the person who has the phone holds the power because they have the pictures of all the other people. And, whether it was a good angle or a bad angle and what that person is going to post and how, as soon as they take a picture, all of them crowd around the phone to look at it. Was it nice or not? No, delete it. Take another one. This is it's a bizarre world we live in. It's bizarre. And I think anyone who sets out to be an influencer, kudos to you. It's an extremely demanding job because everything about your life is now being monetized and being made into a commodity that people can buy and like and share. But you better have a very, very strong center of gravity. You better have an inner, sort of sanctum sanctorum that cannot be moved.
That keeps you,
you better fortify that inside part of you because, man, this can shake you. This can. It really can. And you think it can't, but it can. And it's also like monopoly money, Influencer, influencing is like monopoly money. Does it count?
Yeah, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, leprechaun gold, I feel. Like, you feel like, oh, it's here, it's so much, and I feel so good looking at it. But it just disappears also just as quickly. Just finishing up and speaking about women and speaking about your experience, what would you say to women who want to be RJs or drama teachers or whoever? It's also very South Asian women especially, the challenges one faces when we move beyond the comforts of our home. You took that leap. You left a life and built a new one. What would you say to people, to women who would want to also do something like this and take that leap of faith? Because I know that UAE is very easy to convince people of, especially women, because it's so safe. It is so incredibly safe for women. So if you're talking to women who have to take that leap, and maybe they're deciding on Dubai, maybe deciding on something else, what would you say to them?
Leaving their home countries and coming here? Yeah.
Or living that expat life?
Yeah. Come. Just come. It's okay. You'll be fine. You'll be safe. You'll make
Safe
it.
to yes.
Yeah. you'll make it. Hold the hand of another woman if you want to leap, and leap. Just go for it. And I think prioritize things like financial independence. Some of the toughest lessons that I've learned in the UAE is about ensuring that you've got your head around your money in the right way. No one else is going to do it for you. Learn how to talk for yourself at work. Be unabashedly ambitious. Don't have joint accounts. Have your own money, have your own account, know where it is, know your assets, know where you're building it, be in control of your money. I've met people who on the surface look like millionaires, and you ask them, where's your money? Do you have money? No, my husband has all the cash. Yeah, my brother manages all my finances. My dad has it. So you have money, but you have no access to the money. So matlab, what is the money? Right? So I think these things, like, don't make that mistake. Have your head around the money of it, because if there's one thing Dubai is, it's expensive.
Definitely expensive,
And
and
it
it's
is
also
a
very easy
transactional-
to fall into that trap. The glossy malls and the
Yeah,
great
yeah,
designer
yeah.
handbags. But I think that one thing also which Dubai allows, which people don't see, is that it also, if you, like you said, if you learn to walk the talk, and if you learn to work that room, if you learn to work this city, it's nothing like it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
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 Thank you so much, Malvika.
Thank
For
you.
your time. This was such a lovely conversation. We hope that the hive grows and it grows and it becomes the gigantic space that you want it to be.
Thank you.
And I really hope that people get to take inspiration from your journey.
Thank you so much.
Guys, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, follow Malvika on her social media channels. Check out what she's doing at The Hive. If you're somebody in Dubai who's looking to invest in something like this, please do that. Also, if you're looking to send your children to a space where they can grow into better individuals with emotional intelligence, that is so important in today's and forever's age, don't forget to check out The Hive. Once again, thank you so much, Malvika.
Thank you.
Guys, take care of yourself. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. अपने जान हाथ माल से किसी को नुकसान नहीं पहुंचाएगा. खुदा हाफिज.